I'm begging you, hurry up. The rancher stepped closer and found a life worth saving. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. On the vast stretch of the ranch, the morning air was crisp and alive with the soft sounds of animals beginning their day. Horses neighed in the distance, their breath forming small clouds in the cool air. A gentle breeze rustled through the tall grass, carrying the earthy scent of the soil and the faint perfume of wildflowers scattered across the land. The rancher, a man whose life had been carved out of these very fields, stepped onto the wooden porch of his modest home. His boots made a soft thud against the weathered wood as he paused for a moment, surveying the land he had tended for years. The ranch was more than just property to him. It was a living, breathing companion. Every hill, every creek, every tree held a memory, a story of hard work, patience, and quiet triumph. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the fields with the kind of attention that only comes from years of knowing the land intimately. He had been up before dawn, as he always was, checking on the horses and making sure the fences held. Life on the ranch was simple, yet it demanded diligence. The animals depended on him, the land depended on him, and he had long accepted that responsibility. Today, like every day, he moved through his tasks with practiced ease, feeding the horses, inspecting the water troughs, and ensuring that nothing was out of place. As he worked, a sense of calm settled over him. There was something meditative about the routine, the rhythmic sound of hooves on the ground, the gentle whinnies of the horses, and the soft clinking of metal buckets. He often found solace in these moments, a chance to gather his thoughts before the demands of the day fully arrived. Yet, even in this familiar calm, a small unease tugged at the edge of his consciousness. It was subtle at first, a movement in the distance that seemed unusual, a flicker of something that did not belong. He paused, shading his eyes against the rising sun, trying to discern what had caught his attention. At first, he thought it was just the morning light playing tricks on his eyes, but the feeling persisted, an insistent pull that he could not ignore. The rancher knew these instincts well. Years on the land had taught him to trust the subtle signals his surroundings gave him. Something was different today, something that required his attention. He took a deep breath, inhaling the cool, clean air, and let his gaze sweep across the horizon once more. That's when he saw it, a flicker of motion near the edge of the property by the old creek that wound through the far fields. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but enough to make him pause and consider. Without a second thought, he began moving in that direction. His steps were measured but determined, each footfall deliberate as he crossed the uneven terrain. The grass was tall in places, brushing against his legs, and the ground was damp from the morning dew. He navigated the land with the ease of someone who had spent countless hours reading its contours, avoiding hidden holes and loose rocks. As he approached the creek, the unease he had felt grew stronger. There was a sound now, faint but unmistakable, a voice calling out in urgent tones. It was distant, carried on the wind, but the desperation in it was clear. The rancher's heart quickened, not from fear, but from the recognition that someone or something needed help. He increased his pace, the urgency in the voice matching his own rising concern. The voice came again, louder this time, and with a clarity that sent a shiver down his spine. "I'm begging you, hurry up." The words were filled with fear, pleading, and a raw sense of urgency that pierced through the quiet of the morning. The rancher's mind raced, trying to pinpoint the source. Was it a neighbor, a lost hiker, or someone caught in a dangerous situation on the property? Whatever it was, he knew time was critical. He reached the edge of the creek, where the water flowed swiftly over smooth stones. The sound of the water mingled with the frantic cries, creating a chaotic symphony that heightened the tension. His eyes scanned the area, noting the thick underbrush and the uneven banks that made passage difficult. There was no hesitation. He had faced challenges on the ranch before, from loose cattle to sudden storms, but this was different. This was a matter of life and urgency, and he felt a deep, instinctive pull to act. As he navigated closer, the voice became more distinct. There was a rhythmic pattern to the cries, almost desperate, almost panicked. The rancher's mind worked quickly, assessing the possible dangers, slippery banks, hidden holes, or perhaps an injured person struggling in the water. He adjusted his steps carefully, mindful of every movement, yet driven by the need to reach the source as swiftly as possible. The landscape around him was rugged, a combination of rocky outcrops and dense brush. It was easy to misstep here, and he knew it. But experience had honed his instincts. He moved with a balance of caution and speed, his focus unwavering. Each second felt stretched, elongated by the tension of the moment. The calls for help continued, their urgency cutting through the serene morning, demanding attention and action. Finally, a glimpse through the trees revealed a figure, partially obscured by the undergrowth. It was small, perhaps a young person or a child, struggling against something unseen. The rancher's heart tightened at the sight, a surge of protective instinct fueling his every step. He moved faster now, calling out to reassure the person, letting them know he was coming. "I'm right here, hold on, I'm coming." His voice was calm but firm, a lifeline amidst the chaos. The figure's head snapped toward him, relief and fear mingling in their eyes. The rancher didn't stop. He could see the danger more clearly now. The creek's current was stronger than it appeared, and the person's footing was precarious. Each moment counted, and he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. As he closed the distance, he noticed small details. The way the water lapped against the rocks, the way the brush snagged at the person's clothing, the way the ground threatened to give way underfoot. His mind calculated, his body moved instinctively. Years of ranch work had prepared him for challenges, but nothing quite like this. This was raw, urgent, and human, and he embraced it with every ounce of his being. The person in distress reached out, eyes wide, voice trembling, repeating the plea, "Please hurry." It was a simple cry, yet it carried a depth of fear that resonated with the rancher. He extended his hand, keeping his balance on the uneven terrain, inching closer with steady, deliberate movements. Every muscle in his body was focused, every sense heightened. And then, just as he was about to reach the edge where the person could grab hold, the terrain shifted beneath him. A loose stone rolled, sending a cascade of dirt and small rocks tumbling down. The rancher adjusted instantly, planting his feet firmly, his grip steady, his focus unbroken. The danger was real, yet he pressed on, undeterred by the obstacles. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. The cries for help, the rushing water, the unstable ground, all combined to create a scene charged with tension and raw emotion. Yet amid it all, the rancher remained calm, methodical, and resolute. He was not a man who panicked. He was a man who acted. Finally, he closed the final few feet and reached the edge where the figure could safely grasp his hand. Relief washed over both of them in that instant, a fleeting but powerful acknowledgement that the first critical step had been taken. The rancher's grip was firm, his presence a steady anchor amidst the chaos. The person's fear began to ease, replaced by a tentative trust that the danger could be overcome. The rancher didn't speak immediately. He allowed a brief moment for the situation to stabilize, for the adrenaline to settle, for clarity to return. The morning sun continued its ascent, casting light on the scene, highlighting the vulnerability and courage intertwined in this moment. As he prepared to move the person to safety, he reflected briefly on the chain of events that had led here. The quiet morning, the subtle instinct, the urgency of the voice that called out to him. It was a reminder that life was unpredictable, fragile, and often demanded courage without warning. He had stepped forward, as he always did, guided by a combination of experience, instinct, and compassion. And so, with a steady hand and unwavering resolve, he prepared to guide the person to safety, unaware that this moment would mark the beginning of a story that would test his limits, reveal the depth of human resilience, and ultimately uncover a life worth saving. The rancher felt the tremble of the figure's hand in his own, a small, fragile grip that spoke volumes about fear and desperation. The person, he could now see it clearly, was a young girl, her clothes wet and torn from the underbrush, hair plastered to her face by the morning dew. Her eyes were wide with terror, yet there was a flicker of hope as she clutched his arm. The urgency in her voice had not diminished. "Please, I can't, I'm stuck," she whispered, trembling, her words barely audible over the creek's rushing waters. The rancher's mind worked quickly. He assessed the scene with precision born from years of experience dealing with unpredictable animals, rough terrain, and sudden emergencies. The creek was deeper than it first appeared, and the banks were slippery with mud. A single misstep could send either of them tumbling into the water, but hesitation was not an option. Time was critical, and he knew it. "Hold on tight," he said firmly, his voice steady and calm. "I've got you." Just a little longer. His words were simple, but they carried authority and reassurance. He could see the small body quivering with fear, and he realized that panic was as dangerous as the creek itself. He needed to act with precision, and he needed to keep her calm. Slowly, he positioned himself on a stable patch of ground, bending his knees slightly to lower his center of gravity. He reached out with one hand, gripping a sturdy branch that hung over the creek, and used it as an anchor. With his other hand, he gently grasped the girl's, encouraging her to lean toward him without letting go of her fear. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and careful. One wrong step could turn the situation from tense to tragic. The girl's grip tightened around his hand. "I'm scared, I don't want to fall," she admitted, her voice trembling. The rancher nodded silently, understanding the gravity of her words. Fear could freeze a person in place, but it could also guide them if handled correctly. He gave her a reassuring squeeze and spoke again, softly this time. "I know, but I'm right here. We're going to get through this together." He inched forward, testing the stability of the bank beneath his boots. The mud gave slightly under his weight, but his balance held firm. The girl's feet were trapped between roots and rocks, the uneven ground making it impossible for her to climb out on her own. He scanned the area quickly, looking for anything that could assist. The branch above, a fallen log, even a cluster of rocks that could serve as a step. Each element of the environment became part of his plan, tools in the careful execution of the rescue. As he moved, the girl's voice rose in panicked bursts. I can't," she cried. The rancher's heart ached at her fear, yet he remained composed. "Yes, you can," he said gently. "I'm right here, trust me, one step at a time." His words were simple, but in that moment they were everything. He was more than a stranger, he was a lifeline. The first challenge came quickly. A slick patch of mud gave way under the girl's weight, causing her to slip. Instinctively, the rancher tightened his grip, planting his feet firmly and leaning backwards slightly to counterbalance her momentum. The slip lasted only a fraction of a second, but in that instant both their lives felt suspended in time. She gasped, clutching his arm even tighter, and he whispered, "You're okay. I've got you." He adjusted his position, moving to a more secure footing, and extended his other hand to offer additional support. Carefully, he guided her around the mud, step by step, ensuring that each movement was safe before proceeding. The creek rushed beside them, a constant reminder of the danger. The sound of the water was deafening, yet he remained focused, ignoring the pounding in his own ears. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The girl's fear did not lessen, but it became manageable under his guidance. He spoke continuously, not just to instruct, but to calm. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a few more steps. You're doing great." His voice was unwavering, a steady anchor in the chaotic moment. Suddenly, a new obstacle appeared. A tangle of roots and underbrush blocked their path, forming a natural barrier that was difficult to navigate. The girl froze, unable to find a foothold. The rancher knelt slightly, positioning himself so he could lift her if necessary. "I need you to trust me," he said softly. "I'm going to lift you over this. Ready?" She nodded, eyes wide, and he braced himself. With careful strength, he lifted her just enough to clear the roots, placing her on more stable ground. Her knees were muddy, her hands scraped, but she was safe for the moment. Relief washed over both of them, though there was no time to linger. The creek was still dangerous, and they needed to reach solid ground. As they continued, the rancher's mind briefly reflected on the sequence of events that had brought them here. The quiet morning, the sudden cry for help, the instinct that had driven him forward, every detail had mattered. He had acted without hesitation, relying on experience, training, and instinct. Yet he knew that instinct alone would not have been enough. It was careful observation, patience, and empathy that had guided him through each step. The girl's breathing began to slow as she focused on following his instructions. "Step over this rock, hold my hand, good, now the next one," he directed. His calm presence allowed her to regain a measure of control, turning panic into cautious determination. In that moment, he realized that rescuing someone was not only about physical action, it was about providing confidence, hope, and reassurance. They reached a narrow ledge above the creek, a slightly higher area where the ground was firm and dry. The rancher paused, letting the girl catch her breath. "We're getting close," he said. "Just a little further and you'll be completely safe." She looked at him with trust and exhaustion mixed in her eyes. "Thank you, I thought I was done for," she admitted, voice trembling. He shook his head gently. "No, you're not done. You're strong. You made it this far, and now you're going to get even farther." His words were meant to empower, to remind her that she had agency even in this dire situation. He could see the shift in her posture, the slight straightening of her back, the determination returning to her eyes. But the danger was not yet over. A loose stone under his boot shifted, threatening his balance. He reacted instantly, gripping the girl's hand firmly and planting his feet more securely. "Stay with me," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "We'll make it." The tension in the air was thick, every movement deliberate, every second vital. Finally, they reached a more open area, the ground level and free of obstacles. The girl stumbled slightly, and he caught her with a steady arm. She looked around, taking in the safety of the solid ground, the morning sun warming her damp clothes, the gentle breeze brushing against her face. Relief mingled with disbelief. She had survived, and it was because of him. The rancher knelt beside her, checking for injuries. Her knees were scraped and her clothes were wet and muddy, but she was unharmed. The realization of safety brought tears to her eyes. I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. He smiled gently, brushing mud from his hand. "You don't have to. Just take care of yourself, that's thanks enough." For a few moments, they simply sat there, catching their breath, letting the adrenaline fade. The creek continued to rush beside them, but it no longer seemed threatening. It was just water, no longer a symbol of danger because the crisis had passed. As the rancher guided her toward the main path back to his house, he reflected on what had just happened. The morning had begun like any other, quiet and routine, but it had transformed into a test of courage, skill, and compassion. He had acted instinctively, yet with careful thought, and in doing so had made a profound difference in another person's life. The girl walked beside him, leaning slightly on his arm for support. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I didn't think anyone would hear me." He shook his head. "You're never alone out here. You have to be careful, yes, but there's always someone who will step up when it matters." They continued together, moving steadily toward the ranch house in the distance. The sun had risen higher now, casting warm light across the fields, illuminating the path that had once been treacherous. Birds sang from the trees, their songs a reminder of life's persistence, and the world felt momentarily calm again. As they approached the house, the rancher glanced at her, noting the blend of relief, gratitude, and lingering fear in her expression. This experience would stay with her as it would with him. It was a story of vulnerability, trust, and courage, a story that had begun with a desperate cry and ended with hope. The rancher opened the door, allowing her to step inside. Warm air from the house greeted them, a stark contrast to the cool, wild morning outside. He offered her a seat and fetched a warm towel, helping her dry off and clean the scrapes. The simple acts of care were as important as the rescue itself, grounding her in safety and comfort. As she wrapped the towel around herself, she looked up at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I don't know how I got so lucky," she said. He shook his head, a quiet smile on his lips. "Luck had nothing to do with it. You survived because we worked together. You listened, you trusted, and we took it step by step. That's what makes the difference." The morning stretched into a quiet, reflective calm. Outside, the ranch thrived as usual, the world moving on as if nothing had happened. But inside, a bond had been formed, a connection forged through shared fear and resilience. The rancher and the girl had faced danger together, and they had come through it stronger, wiser, and forever changed. And somewhere in the back of his mind, the rancher knew that this was only the beginning. The rescue had saved her life, yes, but it had also opened the door to something greater, a deeper understanding of courage, empathy, and the quiet power of stepping forward when it truly matters. The girl sat in the warm kitchen, wrapped in a dry towel, her eyes still wide as they processed the morning's events. Every so often, she glanced at the rancher, the man who had stepped into danger without hesitation, and a mixture of awe, gratitude, and curiosity crossed her face. He moved calmly around the room, fetching a clean pair of clothes and preparing a hot drink for her. Even in these ordinary actions, there was a quiet strength, a calm that reassured her more than words ever could. "Here," he said, handing her a cup of steaming tea. "Take your time, breathe. You've been through a lot this morning." The girl accepted it with trembling hands, the warmth of the cup seeping into her fingers and offering a small comfort. She sipped slowly, the heat calming some of the lingering tension in her chest. The rancher watched her carefully, noting the subtle signs of shock, the shallow breathing, the tightness in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted toward the window as if expecting danger to return. "You're safe now," he said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. His voice was steady, even, and calm, the kind of voice that could make a person feel grounded when everything around them had seemed chaotic. She nodded, but her gaze remained distant. I can't believe what just happened," she whispered. "I thought I was done for." "You're not done for," he replied gently. "Not ever, as long as you take care of yourself and trust the people who are there to help. Today, you did exactly what you needed to do, asking for help, keeping calm, and staying with me." That made all the difference. His words were simple, but they carried weight, and the girl felt a small spark of pride despite the lingering fear. After a few moments of silence, she finally looked up at him fully. You saved me," she said softly, almost as if saying it aloud made it real. The rancher nodded, his expression calm but serious. "Yes, I did, but it wasn't just me. It was all the little things, the steps, the care, the attention to each moment. That's what keeps people safe. It's not magic, it's action and awareness combined with trust." The girl thought about that as she set her cup down. I've never met anyone like you," she admitted. Her voice was small, almost shy, but full of honesty. The rancher smiled faintly, brushing his hand across his face as if embarrassed by praise. "I'm just a man who spent a lot of time on this land," he said. "You don't learn to survive without understanding the world around you and being willing to act when it matters." As they spoke, he began to clean her scrapes gently, using warm water and antiseptic. Each motion was careful, deliberate, and kind, showing her that the care extended beyond just the physical rescue. It was about restoring trust, safety, and calm after the trauma. The girl flinched occasionally, but his steady presence reassured her, and soon she began to relax into the process. Outside, the ranch hummed with life. Horses nickered in the stables, birds called to each other, and the wind rustled through the fields, carrying the scent of fresh earth and grass. Life went on, unaware of the morning's near tragedy, but inside the kitchen, time seemed to stretch, holding space for reflection, relief, and human connection. "Do you know why I was there?" she asked finally, her voice quieter now. She hesitated before answering, as if revealing her reasons might somehow shame her. I was trying to cross the creek to get to my grandmother's house. I didn't realize how slippery it was, and I fell. I couldn't get back up." Her words were rushed at first, then slowed, each one carrying the weight of fear and vulnerability she had experienced. The rancher listened intently, nodding occasionally. "It's easy to misjudge things like that," he said. "The land can be tricky, and even the smallest mistake can feel dangerous. You did the right thing by calling out, by asking for help. That's what matters." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. "And you were brave, more than you know." She looked down at her hands, feeling a warmth of appreciation for the man who had risked his safety to save her own. "I never thought someone would come," she admitted. "I thought I was alone out there." The rancher shook his head gently. "You're never truly alone. Sometimes it just takes a little courage to reach out, and sometimes it takes someone willing to listen and act. Today, we both did that." The girl smiled faintly, a small glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. She realized that the morning had been terrifying, but it had also revealed something important: human connection, empathy, and courage. The rancher had shown her that in moments of fear, there was always a way forward if someone acted with care and determination. After the initial calm settled, the rancher suggested that they step outside for some fresh air. The girl nodded, and together they walked toward the yard. The sun was higher now, warming the cool morning air, casting long shadows across the fields. The girl's wet hair had dried slightly in the breeze, and the warmth of the sun seemed to ease some of the tension still lingering in her muscles. As they stepped onto the grass, she noticed the ranch in a new light. What had once seemed vast and empty now felt alive, protective even. The horses in the distance, the trees swaying gently, the gentle hum of life, it all felt part of a larger world that was watching over her, helping her feel safe. The rancher led her toward a small bench near the edge of the property where they could sit and rest. "You need time to process everything," he said. "Sometimes after a scare like this, it helps to pause and let your mind catch up." She nodded, settling onto the bench, taking a deep breath as she looked out over the fields. "I still can't believe how fast everything happened," she said softly. "One moment I was trying to cross the creek, and the next I was falling, and then you were there. It all felt unreal." The rancher nodded, understanding. "It's normal to feel that way. Moments like that can feel like they're happening in slow motion and then all at once. The important thing is what you take from it afterward, the lessons, the gratitude, and the courage to keep moving forward. She thought about his words, realizing how much truth they carried. The morning had been terrifying, but it had also shown her that bravery was not the absence of fear. It was action despite fear. The rancher had demonstrated that fully risking himself to save her, and she felt a mixture of admiration and gratitude. The rancher broke the comfortable silence. "Do you want to walk around a little?" he asked. "Sometimes moving helps clear your mind after something intense." The girl nodded, and together they strolled through the yard. He pointed out small details, the way the horses grazed, the patterns in the grass, the way the sunlight reflected on the creek water. It was as if he was teaching her to notice the world around her, to find calm in observation, and to regain a sense of normalcy. As they walked, the girl's fear began to fade further. Her steps were steadier, her breathing more relaxed. She began asking questions, first about the ranch, then about the rancher himself. Each answer revealed more about his life, his values, and his dedication. She learned that his courage was not sudden. It was cultivated through years of responsibility, awareness, and empathy. Every action that morning had been a reflection of a life spent understanding risk and helping others. After some time, they returned to the house. The rancher suggested a small breakfast to help restore her energy. As they ate, they spoke of lighter topics, horses, the changing seasons, and small tales from his life on the ranch. Laughter began to replace tension, and the kitchen felt warm not just from the sun, but from the human connection that had formed between them. By late morning, the girl felt much stronger both physically and emotionally. The scrapes on her knees had been cleaned and bandaged, her clothes were dry, and her heart no longer raced with panic. She realized how much she had relied on the rancher's presence, and how much it had meant to have someone act decisively and kindly in a moment of danger. The rancher looked at her with a calm, reassuring expression. "You did well today," he said. "Bravery isn't about never being afraid, it's about facing the situation and doing what you can. You did that." "I did my part, but you did yours too," she smiled, feeling a sense of pride mixed with relief. I don't know how I'll ever thank you," she said softly. "You don't have to," he replied simply. "Just remember this day as a lesson in courage, trust, and action." "That's all the thanks I need." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they stepped back outside one last time. The world felt peaceful again, the creek no longer threatening, the fields calm and steady. Life on the ranch continued around them, a reminder that danger, though real, could be met with preparation, care, and courage. The girl took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She realized that her perspective had shifted. What had begun as a terrifying ordeal had transformed into a moment of connection, learning, and growth. She would never forget the rancher, the quiet strength, and the calm presence that had guided her through fear. And for the rancher, this experience reinforced what he already knew. Courage is not always loud or dramatic. It is steady, observant, and compassionate. It is in the willingness to step forward when someone needs help, to act without hesitation, and to provide calm in the midst of chaos. That morning, both of them had faced fear. One had acted and the other had trusted. Together, they had discovered the power of human resilience, empathy, and courage. And though the day had been harrowing, it left them with something enduring. The knowledge that life is precious, that bravery comes in many forms, and that a single act of compassion can make all the difference. The afternoon sun cast long, gentle shadows across the ranch, warming the fields and giving everything a golden glow. The girl had spent the morning recovering, resting, and beginning to process what had happened. Each moment of quiet reflection brought the weight of the morning's danger back into focus, but now it was tempered by relief and gratitude. She realized that she had been through something that few people experienced, a brush with real danger and the kindness of a stranger who risked everything to save her life. The rancher watched her quietly as she moved around the yard, helping with small tasks as he went about his own. Though the physical danger was over, the emotional impact lingered. He could see it in the way she paused to look at the creek, the way her hands trembled slightly when reaching for objects, the careful way she stepped over uneven ground. Trauma had a slow, subtle effect, and he understood that patience and reassurance would be just as important as the rescue itself. "Do you want to see the rest of the ranch?" he asked gently, noticing her curiosity starting to emerge again. The girl nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, I think I'd like that," she said. He led her along the paths he knew so well, pointing out the spots where the horses liked to graze, the orchard that produced the sweetest apples in the county, and the quiet corners where deer and rabbits often appeared. With each story he told about the land, she began to relax more, letting the beauty and rhythm of ranch life soothe her shaken nerves. As they walked, the girl began to talk about herself. She shared small details about her family, her school, and her love of exploring outdoors, the same curiosity that had led her into the creek that morning. The rancher listened attentively, offering encouragement and guidance, not judgment. In that moment, a bond formed, not just from the rescue, but from trust, understanding, and shared respect. He had given her safety and she had begun to trust him, a combination that created a quiet, enduring connection. At one point, they paused near a fence overlooking the creek where the danger had been greatest. The girl stared down at the water, her mind replaying the events in small flashes. "It felt so fast, but also slow," she said softly, her voice thoughtful. "I don't think I've ever been that scared before." The rancher nodded, understanding completely. "That's how fear works. It stretches time, makes every second feel longer, but what matters is what you do in those moments. You stayed calm enough to be saved, and that's something to remember." She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "I guess I learned something today," she said, "about being brave and about trusting people." I never thought someone would risk themselves for me like that." He smiled gently. "People can surprise you," he said. "Bravery and kindness aren't always easy, but they are always worth it. Today we both did what mattered. You survived because you asked for help and stayed steady, and I did what I could to guide you through. That's all it takes sometimes: action, trust, and patience." The girl's gaze drifted to the rancher, admiration and gratitude clear in her eyes. You're like a hero," she whispered. The rancher shook his head softly. "I'm just someone who cares," he said. "Sometimes that's enough to make all the difference." He let the words linger, knowing that it was the kind of lesson she would carry with her long after she left the ranch. As the day continued, the girl began to regain confidence in her movements. She helped the rancher feed the horses, learning small techniques to guide them safely and gently. She discovered that caring for the animals required patience, observation, and careful attention, skills that mirrored what had kept her safe earlier in the morning. Every task became a small act of empowerment, helping her regain a sense of control and stability. The rancher offered gentle guidance as she worked, praising her for her careful movements and teaching her little tricks he had learned over the years. "See how the horse listens when you speak softly and move slowly," he explained. "The same principle applies to people in danger. Calm, steady action is what keeps everyone safe." She nodded, absorbing the wisdom, realizing that the lesson extended far beyond the ranch. By mid-afternoon, the girl was laughing more freely, the tension of fear replaced by curiosity and engagement. The rancher watched her carefully, pleased to see the transformation. She was beginning to process the trauma not as a source of weakness, but as an experience that had revealed courage, resilience, and human kindness. She began to ask questions about the rancher's life, his experiences, and the challenges he had faced. Each story he told gave her a new understanding of what it meant to live a life of responsibility, courage, and empathy. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the fields with long, golden shadows, the rancher suggested a walk toward the barn, where they could watch the horses settle for the evening. The girl followed, and together they walked through the quiet fields, the air filled with the soft sounds of nature and the occasional nicker of a horse. The atmosphere was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the tension of the morning, and it allowed both of them to reflect quietly on what had occurred. At the barn, they paused to watch the horses. The girl noticed how the rancher moved with care, how he guided the animals gently, and how he seemed to communicate with them without words. "You really understand them," she said softly. "I've never seen anyone like that." The rancher chuckled softly. "It's about respect and attention. Animals, like people, respond to how you approach them. Gentle but confident, patient but ready. That's the balance that keeps everyone safe." The girl reflected on the words, realizing that the principles applied to more than just animals. They applied to life itself. Today had been terrifying, but she had survived because someone approached danger with calm, patience, and confidence. She had learned that bravery wasn't the absence of fear, it was action in the presence of it. As the light faded, the rancher led her back toward the house. The girl paused at the edge of the yard, looking back toward the creek where the danger had been. She felt a mix of fear and gratitude, understanding that she had been lucky, yes, but also brave. "I'll never forget this day," she said softly. "Not just because of what happened, but because of you. You showed me what courage really means." The rancher nodded, his expression quiet and serious. "And you showed me what resilience means. Today, we both learned something important. Life will always have moments of danger and uncertainty. How we respond, how we trust, and how we act, that's what defines us." He paused, looking at her with a kind but firm gaze. "Remember that, and you'll carry the lesson for the rest of your life." The girl smiled faintly, feeling a deep sense of connection. "I will," she said. "I promise." They walked back to the house together, the sun now low in the sky, casting long, gentle shadows across the fields. The world seemed peaceful, the earlier tension replaced with calm, reflection, and understanding. Inside, the girl helped with small chores, learning more about daily life on the ranch, and the quiet dedication required to care for the land and animals. The rancher observed her closely, providing guidance and encouragement. Every action she took built confidence, a way of reclaiming agency after the fear and helplessness she had felt earlier. By the time evening fell, she was moving and speaking with a new sense of assurance, her gratitude for the morning's rescue deepening with each passing hour. Dinner was a quiet affair, the warmth of the house contrasting with the cool evening air outside. They spoke in gentle tones, sharing stories, reflections, and small laughter that brought the day to a close. The rancher noticed the shift in her demeanor, from frightened and cautious to thoughtful, reflective, and engaged. It was a transformation born of experience, care, and courage, and it filled him with quiet satisfaction. After dinner, they stepped outside one last time. The stars had begun to appear in the night sky, twinkling over the vast fields of the ranch. The girl looked up in awe, realizing how vast and beautiful the world could be, even after moments of fear and danger. "I feel different," she said softly. "I feel stronger. I feel like I've learned something important." "You have," the rancher said. "You learned that fear can be faced, that courage comes in many forms, and that kindness matters more than we sometimes realize. Today wasn't just about being rescued, it was about learning how to move through life with awareness, patience, and heart." The girl smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle within her. She realized that her life had been forever changed by the morning's events, not just because she had survived, but because she had witnessed courage, compassion, and human connection in its purest form. The rancher had shown her that life, even in its most dangerous moments, could be met with calm determination and empathy, and that those lessons would stay with her forever. As they walked back toward the house, the rancher glanced at her and offered a quiet piece of advice. "Always remember, every choice matters, every moment counts. When danger comes, act with calm and care, trust in those who help, and never underestimate the power of patience and courage. That's how you save lives, sometimes your own, sometimes someone else's." The girl nodded solemnly, understanding completely. "I will remember," she said. "I promise." That night, as she lay in bed in the small guest room, she thought back over the day. What had begun as an ordinary morning had become extraordinary. A moment of terror transformed into a lesson in courage, compassion, and human connection. She realized that while fear had been present, so had bravery, kindness, and trust, and those elements had made all the difference. Across the ranch, the rancher looked out at the fields, the horses settled in the stables, the sun finally gone beyond the horizon. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that a life had been saved, a lesson had been shared, and a bond had been formed. Courage, he reflected, was not always loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and compassionate. And in moments like these, it revealed its true power. The girl drifted to sleep with a sense of peace she had never known before, and the rancher returned to his duties, quietly reflecting on the day. They had both faced fear, acted with courage, and discovered the enduring strength of human connection. The creek, the fields, and the ranch would continue as always, but the morning's events had left a lasting impression, a reminder that life is fragile, bravery is quiet but powerful, and compassion can save lives in ways that nothing else can.